Don't embarrass me.
You can't find it though.
Did you need yours?
I guess I don't need to plug in right then.
Whoever's running the owl should probably be plugged in.
I'm muted.
We're all set there.
Thanks. Okay.
But we're not seeing anything on the screen.
Because that's gonna plug into whoever's actually.
But it's
Present.
I see the owl. On
But
Zoom.
she will when she plugs back in.
Oh, okay.
I'm glad you're here, William, because I would have no
I don't
clue.
know, Jamie's voting with confidence.
Like- Skepticism now and driven the town, assistant town manager out of his chair.
So, I don't know if this can connect to mine. This can connect to mine, then Angela, you can share your screen without having.
Yeah, that would be good. Okay.
Technology is great. I've been learning.
Take a village.
All right, let's see. I think we might be,
Think we're ready? Almost?
I think we're ready.
Do you need to report?
No, we're streaming live.
Oh,
All right. Welcome to the ordinance meeting on Valentine's Day, and I'm very sorry if I'm interrupting people's dinners and whatever. I will now call this meeting to order. I will make note that Councilors Hamel and Scyther are here along with myself, Jean Marie Caterina. Can I have approval of minutes for January 10th?
so moved?
Second.
All in favor? That's unanimous. As folks know, I start these meetings with public comment. I allow up to 15 minutes. That doesn't mean you can talk for 15 minutes. You can talk for 3 minutes maximum on anything that's on the agenda, and then we shut down the public comment. Remember, you're free to send emails. I encourage emails. I've talked to the clerks about making sure that any emails that come in are attached to the minutes. So when the minutes come out, you'll be able to see all the other comment that may have come in via email. With that being said, if you wish to speak on anything that's on this current agenda, please get thyself over to the podium. Post haste. No. And introduce yourself and give us your name and address. You know the drill.
Hi,
Thanks.
Happy Valentine's Day. Diane Smith, 10 Beacon Street in Scarborough. I'm just, I did send an email earlier, but I just had some questions regarding Attorney Saucier's memo that was on last month's agenda and has also been attached to the last 2 agendas for the council. It specifies exceptions for medical cannabis. And it says municipalities cannot prohibit caregiver retail stores, registered dispensaries, cannabis testing facilities and manufacturing facilities that were operating with municipal approval prior to December 13th, 2018. Municipal approval means an examination approval of the type of medical cannabis establishment, not simply the issuance of a building permit or other approval that does not address the facility. So I just got a few questions that I really don't expect to be answered tonight, maybe soon.
Sure.
The first question, did the town physically examine and approve medical cannabis establishments prior to December 13th, 2018? What type of approval was given? Was it a building permit or occupancy permits? If so, how many medical cannabis cultivators or caregivers were given permits prior to December 13th? And of those, how many remain in the same permitted location today? That's just to kind of put it together. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're gonna have some answers for you.
Oh, wonderful.
I think, right, Lynn?
We'll have
Sort of.
some more information.
More info. Anyone else? Post haste, my dear, post haste.
Alison Bristol, 6 Bayview Avenue. I have comments on two things, the TBC height request and the buffer ordinance, but I'm going to start with buffer ordinance and if I have time to do the other. First of all, just as a point of information and full disclosure, I was elected to the board of the Haven Speech Association last summer, and you may or may not know that the association is a social organization, not a governing body or representative, with about 3% of Haven Speech residents as members. We have, for a number of years, we've had a civic committee, which was recently renamed Community Affairs, whose charge it is to stay abreast of town meetings and initiatives as pertains to Haven Speech and the community, keep members apprised and encourage direct communication with the town. I just want to be clear that my comments on the proposed ordinance are mine alone, and as an individual and not representative of the HBA. A couple of things. So the ordinance that is revised as the agenda attachment is not the current ordinance as it was amended in 2014, but it appears to be a new version. It's a new version that's been redlined and greenlined. Some of the new language is fragmented, so it's hard to follow the intent. It would be helpful to see a redlined version of the current ordinance. And question, what's the status of the new 3-year IFW beach management agreement that covers Haven Beach, Pine Point, and Ferry Beach? This draft, this ordinance draft appears to be kind of Haven Beach centric. In other words, only the Haven Beach management area map is attached. The IFW beach management agreement that expired in 23 is very clear that April 1 through August 31 restrictions are removed once fixed and fledged. The new language in the ordinance, some of the purpose implies that restricted areas are in effect for the full 4 months as no exceptions are specified. In number 2, newly defined significant habitat area definition is too broad. Plovers and terns could forage anywhere on the beach, well outside the 650-foot parameter established for recreational activities. Also, 4J stipulates no person shall engage in recreational activity within the habitat area, which by this definition could be anywhere on the beach. Under the recreational activity definition, any individual moving at a pace faster than the walk is over the top. Regarding number 7, relation to private protection efforts, reads that the ordinance is not intended to supersede or displace efforts or activities of individuals or organizations or protections afforded to plovers by deed restriction, conservation easement, and other types of private governance. The new language takes out those 3 qualifications, so it now seems to allow any private individual or organization with any provision more restrictive.
You're 20 seconds over the 3 minutes.
Okay.
The light, yeah, the lights.
One quick thing.
Yeah,
So it seems to allow any private individuals or organizations to advance any provisions that are more restrictive than what's in the ordinance. This contradicts the provisions outlined in the ordinance that should be taken out. The ordinance states it's intended to be consistent with state and federal protections, which should be sufficient. Otherwise, anyone can make up their own rules.
thank you. That was good.
Sue Foley Ferguson, I didn't know the rules beforehand. I thought each item was gonna happen. Okay, so I would just say that I would concur with what she said about significant habitat, is that it's a little bit confusing because significant and essential habitat is defined by the Maine Department of Fish and Wildlife Service as a very specific thing. And then you tend to, in the ordinance, you start using the word just habitat, and it's not clear whether you're talking about that entire part that they own over to the right-hand side and the nesting areas, or just the nesting areas. And I guess my only recommendation was that be very clear about what, because significant habitat really goes even further. It can go, you know, to the woodlands where they forage and whatnot, to central habitat. Whereas the nesting habitat, so do you want people not to throw frisbees in the nesting habitat or the entire habitat, which is the entire beach? And that's kind of what I had read into this. And there's some administrative errors that I'm not even gonna talk about, but I might maybe just.
I was gonna say, if you could send me, or send me an email. or
Yeah, send me.
something.
Other than that.
Great,
thank you.
awesome, thanks very much.
Yep.
Anybody else? Going.
No, we have one online.
Oh, we do, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask them. Thank
Francis
you.
Walsh, you want to speak?
Thank you. I'm unmuted, I guess. You hear me?
Yes,
Okay, I did not intend to speak. I was hoping to be at the meeting and unfortunately was not able to make the meeting. I am a volunteer.
oh, could
I'm
you,
sorry.
could you tell us where you live, again,
Francis
your name
Walsh,
and where you live?
51
sorry.
Starboard Drive in Cape Elizabeth.
Okay,
My
thank
wife,
you.
my wife and I have been volunteers for several years at Higgins Beach. We also test the water for Maine Healthy Beaches at Higgins. And we also are volunteers at Crescent Beach for the plovers. I was listening. I have another appointment I have to get to, but I wanted to speak. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. And I know that Jamie is going to speak, and both Sue Naden and Glennis are at the meeting. But I do want to just say that with regard to significant habitat, let me first start by saying that shorebirds have been on the beaches long before beachgoers. Our purpose as volunteers and monitoring plovers is to educate the people that are on the beach. As far as significant habitat area goes, it includes not only the nesting area, but also the area where plovers and least terns forage for food, which is anywhere on the beach all the way down to the tide line, to the water's edge. So as I said, our goal is to educate beachgoers, and hopefully the shorebirds can coexist with beachgoers. It's very difficult on beaches that are open to the public, and it's even more difficult on beaches like Crescent, which are state parks. But we are we're very successful, I think, and we've seen the birds nesting and fledging. I also would like to stress that in talking with people that come to the beach that find out that there are nesting shorebirds on the beach, heightens their enjoyment of being on the beach. So we're not there to keep people off the beach. We're there to protect the birds, to educate people. And I think it's a great thing for the state of Maine and any coastal community. It increases the awareness and the interest in people that are coming to the beach to know that there are endangered birds that are nesting, that are hatching eggs, and that the chicks are feeding and then fledging to come back in the future. So I just hope that any questions that you have, we certainly will answer. I did work with with other people on this ordinance because we have been volunteering on the beach, and I've done a tremendous amount of research. So if there are questions, I would certainly be available, maybe not later in this meeting, but certainly would help to rework the ordinance if Jamie needs help or anyone else needs help with that. So thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, anybody else? Anyone online? Keep putting them that one. All right, with that, I will close public comments. Thank you, everyone. You guys were right to the point, major points, and we'll take all that into consideration. And just so the public will know, I did get a couple of emails today too, on input also. So again, what my plan is that when the minutes come out, they will be attached, any emails that come in between now and when the minutes get out. So just so you know, because I want to make sure everyone's aware of everything that goes into the decisions that we make. And also a reminder for people who may not be aware that, we're a committee of the whole council. We aren't the whole council. We're just saying, does this go further? What sort of changes or whatever might be needed? Does it even move forward to the whole council? So just to remind folks. All right, let's look at item 5, which is chapter 601, traffic ordinance. Who's gonna speak, Angela or
Sure.
Chief Holmquist?
I'll start.
Okay.
But, so I just want to, I'm wondering, remind everyone that we were here in October with a couple of the items that we're bringing forward again. I know at the time it was just a transition period, not that anybody was opposed to the proposal. It was just trying to fully bake it before coming back to you. And so that's why we're here now. In the meantime, we have added an additional, revision to chapter 601, which Chief Holmquist can speak to on that one, but I'll go over some of the items that we talked about before, starting with the parking ordinance. And one of the things that had come up, and maybe Chief could actually speak to where this came from, is really looking at East Grand Avenue. And right now, with the repaving, I know council was interested in how that gets restriped on the non-beach side. It came to our attention at that point also that on the beach side of East Grand Ave, it is currently in the ordinance written that it is seasonal parking. And that has been problematic. And so looking at it and looking at safety concerns and different intersections, we were proposing to actually strike the language for the exception. So essentially, this ordinance says there's no parking in Scarborough unless these exceptions, right? So how we have this written by striking it means it goes back to the default of there's no parking along the beach side of East Grand Avenue. I don't know if you want to speak to.
Yeah, so just receiving complaints from a couple of folks that live down there, and seeing firsthand what a vehicle that is parked according to the seasonal sign that's currently there. The vehicle is partially into the travel lane, which in the fall may not be an issue, but I think in the summer months, that's going to cause traffic to have to merge into that opposing oncoming lane. And the signage, didn't seem to be too much consistency. There were some parts of that road that were no parking. Other parts that there's just no rhyme or reason. There's seasonal parking and no parking zones along the ocean side. So to make this more consistent and to make it a little bit easier for our traffic enforcement folks to decipher the language in the ordinance, and for the safety concerns, we decided to propose this change.
And I highlighted on here, that's number 27 is what is actually referenced in the ordinance language. And the red is really the change, because it's a little convoluted, but the language really refers back to number 27, and then beyond is already no parking. So the next one with something that this committee has not seen, and that is parking related to Avenue 4. So currently there are two back-to-back items within this section that talk specifically about Avenue 1, 2, 3, and 6 as being extremely just exactly the same, each street. For some reason, Avenue 4 is different, slightly different, and that's where the complaint, I believe, came from. And so the proposed language puts that to be consistent with the other streets, the parallel streets between Jones Creek and King Street.
Yeah, just it created some issues for the property owner that doesn't have any signage in front of her property. Folks that were partially blocking her driveway when she needed to get out with her elderly mother. Some folks that had been staying there overnight which is a recent development for her. Over the years, she's had to deal with the traffic issues, but to have overnight parking there, something new that she was seeing, and just the bottleneck to an abundance of cars on her property coming out into the street. Just that bottleneck effect was made it difficult for delivery truck drivers to get down through, and especially if they had to make a delivery. So again, to make this more consistent with the named avenues down at Pine Point, just to make it more consistent, we've proposed this change as well.
And then the final edit to 601 that we are proposing had to do with speed limits. And currently, this was, I think, what started the whole revisions for 601 is the way our ordinance is written actually identifies the names of roads and the speed limits on those roads, including DOT regulated jurisdiction roads like Route 1 and others that are, or even state highways. What ends up happening is, as DOT, who is the authority that regulates speed limits, as they make adjustments, it doesn't always get reflected in our ordinance. So there's some discrepancies that we're finding, also some omissions and some errors. And so as we continue having that, and that's why you'll see a lot of red line there, what this is in working with DOT, this is some language out of their statute. It refers back to that. They are the authority that regulates the speed limits in town. So it refers back to them so that it's the one place where you can be sure you're finding the right speed limit for any road in town. And so this language that we worked through with DOT, and this is the same language that we presented in October, but I'm happy to answer any questions with any of these.
Quick question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this covers the whole town, so this is also include the Maple Avenue and those areas that are currently under discussion.
So right now, the town of Scarborough does not have any authority to set speed limits. So if we put a street sign out for a speed limit, it has to be based on information given from DOT. So there are some roads, there's a handful of them that I have requested speed studies from DOT, because DOT has never actually set a speed limit on some certain roads. They've just never been asked. And so this exercise gave us the ability to go through our ordinance and see where those holes were, because Maple Ave is an example of one that was in our ordinance, but DOT never set the speed limit. So it's really not a legal speed limit set in that respect. Yeah.
There's part of this that defines explanation, understanding, seems to just get stuck in my narrow little mind times, and that is, so they haven't set a speed limit, but you can set a speed limit.
So there
I
is
thought that
defaults, right?
everything, given home rule, if they didn't hold forth on it, we had the authority to do something. So do I have that wrong for this?
We don't have the authority to set the speed, but there are defaults. And maybe Chief can, and that's where the second item is listed. Those are for those roads that DOT has not set, or that regulated speed limit. There's some defaults. So if you're talking about neighborhoods, the default would be 25. And for more of those collector roads would be 45, and that's for the discretion of the police officers for enforcement. To that point, that you don't want to have a road that's not set by DOT and then there's no way to enforce anything. So that's where they come into this, the information you see in the bullets is kind of the default if it's not set.
So it's Maple Avenue down 25,
By default,
and it's 25 miles an hour, low enough to put some sort of traffic calming devices in there?
yes, we're talking about traffic calming at Maple Ave. We're doing that analysis now.
So when is that gonna happen?
Once the policy gets approved, sir, then we'll make the next steps. We'll come up with a recommendation for specifically Maple Ave by April 1st.
So I'm a broken record on this, but I think we need something while the policy is being formulated. So I sent a note to the town manager on this, expressing my concerns in detail. I won't share them here, but I still think, I understand what we're trying to do, but I just think we're in a very bad space.
April?
I have some questions, just about the impacts of some of these language changes, if you don't mind, Angela, can you bring up the map with, yes. So when we talk about eliminating parking on East Grand Avenue, this road has been recently paved, it needs to be restriped, or that's all done?
That is done.
Okay, and so this language eliminates parking on both sides of the street?
No.
Or just, this is why I'm asking for clarification. So what are we removing that people are accustomed to having now, I guess is how I would like to frame it.
So the seasonal, parking from, what was it, May 15th through the seasonal parking,
Okay,
signs, it'll be no parking at all on the ocean side of East Grand Ave. Mainly for those safety reasons, if you get in a line of cars parked, the way it's signed right now. In the peak of the summer months and with traffic coming both ways, you're gonna have cars venturing into that opposing lane.
do you have any idea on the approximate number of spaces?
So that was on me and I did not get to that today, but we were looking at how we restriped the opposite side, is really trying to follow MUTCD standards, which is so basically trying to find some safety guidance around that, which really is no parking within 10 feet of a crosswalk or an intersection. So as you look at this grid and all the roads going down to the beach, it essentially leaves a gap of 2 to 3 spaces between each of those probably.
I want to make sure that we communicate the impact and
Yeah.
that I completely understand the safety concerns. I understand the inconsistencies with the signage and how that would obviously create confusion. I just want to make sure that we communicate the impact of what this is going to do, and also that I kind of wrap my head around the impact that this is going to have and what other pressures this is going to put. Because to then my next question, which is, do you have any idea why Avenue 4 was excluded from any of that language? That's just a mystery. And that happens sometimes too. But to that point, Avenue 4 was excluded, so it didn't have the signage. It was putting pressure on the property owner who lives on Avenue 4, probably several of them. When we eliminate that parking on East Grand Avenue, I'm just worried that it's gonna put parking pressures on other parts of Pine Point, and I want to be really forward thinking, because I know that we have at one point taken up and talked about parking and allowing people to collect a fee and let people park on their lawns and things like that. And I just feel like eliminating a large number of parking spaces in one fell swoop, we're just gonna see a lot of this pressure kind of seep into the rest of the Pine Point area.
Thank you. I might have some additional color to add to April's questions, which are great. And I want to thank you for taking this on. The traffic ordinances are gnarly ordinance. And I think the last time we did anything like this was, 5-6 years ago. So thank you for taking the time to kind of go through it and to deal with it thoroughly and deliberately. There is a proposal coming forward from the Coastal Waters and Harbor Advisory Committee. And we're, I think I sent that to the council and copied the council. So it's sent it to the council. So it's forthcoming. It doesn't recommend, it recommends that we explore paid parking. And it's not everywhere, it's just in certain areas. So they're coming forward with that. I want to piggyback on what April said about the work that was done in the repaving project for East Grand Avenue. That's my neighborhood, so intimately familiar with it. I haven't heard any complaints about the reduced number of spaces, frankly. I think that might actually have some traffic calming, aspects in addition to, the safety measures that were mentioned. The final thing is I'd say that on the parking on the beach side of East Grand Avenue, and Chief Holmquist was kind enough to come down and actually look at the signage, but the signage permitted and the ordinance permitted parking on the ocean side where there are no spaces. And there is no shoulders, so people actually technically were allowed to park on someone's property, you know, in the right of way. So we mentioned, you know, crowding the travel lane. Yeah, it went way beyond that. So this is a very welcome revision that we never knew it was so, it was so bad until a few people started parking that way. And it was nothing, we couldn't think of it. Yes, so.
That is a good point. There was no formal parking
Wait.
actually identified.
And my
on that
neighbor-
side.
And my kids and I drive
Yeah.
straight to the beach parking
Yeah.
lot, and so I can't even tell you, like, I mean, that's the beauty of having a beach pass, right? Like, I drive right to the municipal lot, and I have driven that road a million times, but if you're not actively looking for a parking space and in that frame of mind, I've probably driven by all those cars and just not thought anything of it, and just made my way to where I was going, so I'm glad to get feedback from the residents.
And my neighbor, my butter, with the back fence, still waiting, thanks.
I have a question, and it has to do with my end of town. With the changes, potential changes in the, no, I can't find them. Here with me here, I can't, well, I should write it same here, let's do it. I noticed, like, for example, New Road was struck, and I know that we had the most bizarre, you know, speed limit thing in the whole world, because, you know, this road and from this house to this house, and
Yeah.
it's just weird, so I get this. But just as an example, what's a definition of a neighborhood, because New Road is a street right behind me, and it's built up. Right now, it's 35. But is that considered a neighborhood, because it's, you know what I'm saying?
Is it? based
Because
on
if
your
they go
discretion?
45 on a street like that, that's not gonna be good.
It's posted 35.
Yeah.
But that is one that DOT has set.
DOT did set New Road, because New Road was specifically mentioned in the ordinances you're striking.
Well, we're striking all of them.
Right, but I'm just saying, I was just using that as an
Yes,
example.
yeah, so
Because it's
instead
not
of,
the only one of out in the middle of the
so
world.
I'm not
Right.
saying that all of these are
Okay.
not, have not been set by DOT, the exact
Okay.
opposite. The majority of our roads in town have
Yeah.
been set by DOT. The problem is, the discrepancies that occur. As
Okay,
Pine
right.
Point Road, I think, was an example of that. DOT actually adjusted the speed limit and reduced it, but we weren't informed. And
Yeah.
so our ordinance was different than the posted,
Gotcha.
which was different than the authority who actually set it.
Okay.
So it's a matter of getting rid of all of them. And then kind of
Starting
referring it back to DOT, who is the authority. And that's why I said, going through it, I only found 5 in our ordinance in
Because-
comparison that, we actually had in our ordinance that DOT had not set.
Okay,
And so that's what, as soon as we found that,
Cool.
that's in October, I reached out to DOT, and that's
Okay.
when we were here in front.
that
of
answers
board.
my question
That's a
then.
good
Yep,
That makes sense, because I was first thinking, oh my God, does that mean this is
Yeah.
gonna go up to 45? Well. I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else have questions?
I have one question.
Yeah,
The office space that's approved on East Grand Avenue. Have we verified in fact that that is a continuing business operation? Because that. I think was something that was created many years ago, and I don't believe there is a.
what does that have to do with the?
where is it?
You have that. As booth space where it's parking and lot.
Oh, in the ordinance?
Yes,
Oh, on the non-beach side?
correct,
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and. Sorry, but my ears are big.
What is it?
Here's the-
Yeah.
Yeah, well, is this a new business you're talking about? You're curious about what's been put? forward?
Have it like to be with certain things.
It is consistent with the changes that are being proposed, but they're continuing to save that space. It's one single space is reserved for office space, and I do not believe that the business is still on operation.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, this is
And
the
I
whole
can't
thing.
think of it. I was looking at it this.
Oh, no, it's not. Oh, it's not. This is no parking.
It's near the mom and pop store on the right hand side.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I don't know, it's free, but it's something, I think we have. That's the,
Anyway.
yeah, that's the only thing that
Okay,
is, but I don't see that as a reason.
yeah, no.
That you
What,
wanted to make another revision
I
or,
would think potentially that.
Yeah.
If it's not an operating business, then that space should not be reserved for lots, or it should be available.
I would agree.
So. But that's local knowledge.
No, that's true. That's
Your
true.
local room.
What would you guys like to do with this? I mean, I don't see that we need to do anything, particularly in ordinance. Why don't we move it forward to the council?
Touch that on. Wait, no, first read.
What do you think? Jim?
I will make a motion to move this as presented to the full council.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Yes. I thought you were second, I'd say I third. So,
No, I stay out of that. Can we all vote, please? And all in favor?
we're
No
not
one's
used to doing
opposed, so
that.
it's unanimous. So we'll move this forward to council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You can now go out to Valentine's Day. And what's next? I know I gotta get back to my.
I'm getting to Jamie's slide
Oh, okay.
or the next
Perfect.
slide.
Angela just can't get enough of us.
Yeah, I thought I would let her talk about it.
I was gonna say, Angela, you're gonna talk about piping plovers? So item 6 is chapter 610 piping plover ordinance. Jamie.
So the changes in your packet were brought forward by residents of Higgins Beach and also slash volunteers who have participated in the volunteer beach monitoring program for a number of years, as well as staff from the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. So I agree that the version that is in your packet is probably not the cleanest version to be looking at. So I am happy to go through and clean it up a little bit and make the red line a little bit more obvious for the recommended revisions that are being proposed. For example, the addendum at the end should be all about the Higgins Beach Wildlife Management Area. That is all new. That wasn't in the
Yeah.
original
Right.
ordinance, so that should be redlined and not considered to be. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
black, yeah.
Yeah, it's correct. It's black in the packet that you have, so I apologize that there's some discrepancy there. So the intent was to provide more clarity around with the ordinance and how it relates to the beach management agreement that was referenced. I do believe we're due for a renewal of the beach management agreement. It's been renewed twice since I've been here, so over the past 5 years, and only minor changes have been made. So I don't anticipate IF&W requesting anything significant in the beach management agreement this year. So it should be consistent with what's being proposed in the ordinance.
Do you know when the next renewal is?
It should be this year.
This year?
It's usually IF&W brings it forward to us. That's not
Okay.
something that we request from them. So I have a meeting set with them in a couple of weeks, so I can ask about that, about the status of that. The one thing I do want to note is that I am proposing an additional change to what is in here related to fireworks. So I've kind of called it out in here on the screen since you don't have it in front of you. So currently, letter F in section 4, letter F is specifically dealing with fireworks in the Higgins Beach area. I felt like that was confusing because we also have restrictions on Pine Point and Ferry Beach. And so I added language in there referencing chapter 608A, the Consumer Fireworks Ordinance, and 612, the Community Services Rules and Regulations for use of parks and recreational facilities, just so it's more clear that we're not just restricting, that fireworks aren't just restricted on Higgins, it's on all of our town beaches.
They're specifically banned. So to speak.
Yes. one side note is that the consumer fireworks ordinance doesn't actually reference anything in relation to the other beaches. So that might be something that could be looked at and cleaned up in the future, just so to minimize some of that confusion also.
So this, we're being,
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm a little more informal.
thanks for the look at this. So as currently written, it wouldn't specifically prohibit discharging fireworks, my point, or otherwise known as brand.
Yeah, my read of it, it doesn't specifically prohibit. So the chapter 612 says that you are not allowed to discharge fireworks unless you have written permission from community services. And that goes for all town parks and facilities. So I will say community services or the owner of the park is, and that maybe we should add that language in there specifically as well.
It's not a position statement.
No, I'm just saying, I was actually surprised too, when I kind of dug into this a little bit more and looking at our fireworks ordinance, I was like, oh, that's interesting. We don't call out our beaches specifically. So it might be something we want to look at.
Some of us would like to. Okay. Anything else that we should be aware of?
Oh, the other one that I wanted to call your attention to, was, adjusting the, penalties for violation of this ordinance. So originally it was, $50 to, $250 would be the penalty. It's being proposed that it be raised to $100 to $500 to be consistent with the, animal control ordinance.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Questions? April or Dawn? Are there any other questions, concerns?
The only thing I'd say is that I think it's an important initiative to try to make sure that we're thinking our way through how to protect these areas. The question I have for you is how much do we think the damage from the storms has done? What effect has that had? I mean, that's, I'm guessing it's been profound, so that would argue in favor of trying to, reinforce the restoration of the habitat or whatnot.
Yeah, it's gonna be a rough season this year and probably years to come because their habitat has been significantly disturbed.
I know that, I'm sorry.
No, that's
Go
okay.
ahead.
I have a question before you move on, so if you.
Yeah, no, I'll get that. Oh, yeah, we're wide open here. Under purpose, I noticed that someone struck that on before April 1st. I would agree with that. I mean, you've got to have a definite.
You need a definite date, yeah.
Date. So I was glad to see that. Adding lease terms to it, to me, makes perfect sense. I did have an email from a constituent regarding the use of the term foraging. Because their concern was that the whole beach could get shut down because of foraging. Did you see that email?
I did not,
Oh,
no, but I
sorry,
think that it was reflected in public comment, and I did make some notes. I think that we can kind of tighten that up so it's more clear. Probably adding into the significant habitat area and as denoted by symbolic stake and twine and exclosures. Which basically Main Audubon will mark with stake and
Right,
twine
right.
where the habitat area is likely to be.
Yeah.
And so it should basically be from dune to low water in that area. Is
Okay.
what should be considered the
So that
significant
should be
habitat
tightened
area.
up a bit, yeah.
Yeah, because it does kind of make it seem like the entire beach could be shut down because
Yeah.
these, especially plovers, they're very mobile. When
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
chicks, so they may move outside of the stake and twine areas. So I do think that there need to be some parameters
Okay.
around that to tighten it up a little
So
bit.
that would, I couldn't find the foraging in front of me. Anyway, go ahead. April.
No, that's exactly, I was just gonna request that we address some of the things we heard in public comment. It's hard to match up what people say sometimes when you're trying to read such a dense document that, as you pointed out, has been redlined. And I just wanted to make sure that that feedback was being incorporated into our discussion. And so as long as we're able to tighten up that definition of what the habitat is and how it would be marked, then I think that's a necessary improvement and I would support that. So.
I also had some, not concerns, but I was like, well, why isn't we have a map of Higgins? But we don't have a map of Western, we don't have a map of Pine Point.
So the map, of the restricted areas is included in our animal control ordinance. The map was added at the request of, IF&W just to show the portion of Higgins Beach that is owned and operated and managed by IF&W, because they have restrictions on that area, that exceed our town restrictions. So they're going to have kind of the symbolic fencing and things like that up longer than, would be on, the town-owned or operated areas of Higgins
Oh,
Beach.
interesting. Okay, that's good. Okay. And I was also glad to see that we made it for animals, not just dogs.
Yeah, we have had issues with cats
there's-
recently.
There's
Yeah.
other, potentially other animals that people were allowing to wander. What are you guys thinking? You think it's ready to go to council? You think you wanted to see it back? I know April 1st is coming right up. And I'm feeling like there's some time with this. Constraints, or we're under the gun to some degree. Yes, no, go ahead, Don.
The only thing I'd ask for is a worth having some way to socialize it more, at least laterally in the community, so it's not just kind of one, I mean, I'm not opposed to this.
Well, it's gotta go through council.
Right, but there are other, hear me out here, so,
Yeah.
say for example, would there be some benefit, in having feedback from, conservation? Would there be, some benefit in having some input or at least endorsement, sort of from, sustainability? Anyway, I'm not looking for excuses
No, that's fine.
to not move it.
Has
forward,
sustainability looked at this or?
It would
or
be more
conservation?
likely to be Conservation Commission,
Yeah,
and
that's what I
they,
was thinking.
and they haven't looked at it, no.
Thought you.
I don't see that they would be opposed to any of these recommendations.
I mean, I know I'm leaning towards, you know what I mean? I'm leaning towards, if it doesn't need any major fixes prior to going to council, let it go to council, because then it's got the public hearings and readings and whatever. And I am aware of, April 1st coming up, and if we're gonna make changes, I'd like to have them in place by then, if we can. But I could go either way on it, so that's why I'm looking at.
I think I tend to like to have things work through our committees, but in this case, I don't necessarily know that Conservation Commission would have significant feedback, one way or the other, and I don't want to hold it up, just to have it as a single agenda item on their agenda either. I'm okay with sending this to council and letting it get some airtime.
So I'm not opposed with it moving forward, provided we get input along the way from conservation. We're not speaking for them, we're deciding for them that they don't need to see it. I mean, when there be a benefit to them, actually, say yes.
Yeah, I mean, they meet at the end of the month, so I can ask them to take a look at it and provide comment, and if they have any, and I can provide an update when this goes to council.
That's what I would like to do.
Yeah,
I
let's
think we
do
should
that.
make the recommendation to send it to council, with the caveat that Jamie's gonna, put it in front of Conservation Commission in the meantime.
So motion.
That is a motion.
Sorry. All those in favor? That sounds like a plan.
Thank you very much.
And I'll make sure a cleaner version.
Yeah, that's fine. Get it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The red line will be back to the ordinance.
Yeah.
Because this isn't the actual.
It will be.
All right, who's next? Oh, planning.
We're just getting more than enough.
Yeah.
Move forward with it.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the landscaping ordinance, or the proposed landscaping. this on. Alright, where did my slideshow go? Give me just a second, it's not.
Yeah, no problem.
Hold on.
I'm working it. Leland.
See it on my screen. Okay, here we go. Got it. Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. So this draft ordinance, I actually brought before you in October.
Yep.
And, Counselor Hamilton will be new to you, but this is a part of the ordinance consolidation that planning has been working on that is seeking to consolidate Chapter 405B, the site plan standards with the commercial design standards. And so we have gone through lighting successfully, and those are updated and in place and being used at the planning board as we speak.
I
This
thought it
is,
had grown.
I'm sorry.
I thought it had grown a bit since the first time I saw it. Thank you.
Sure. So this is the landscaping portion. This started with the long range committee last summer, and we've been going through it for quite some time. And then it got to you all in October. I think that meeting got a little long, so we thought about just doing the plant list.
Right.
But I wanted to get input from professionals in the area, landscape architects and developers. And so I decided not to take the plant list. I wanted to get a little bit more input. And so we've been able to do that. And what you have in front of you is a very colorful draft. And I apologize for the colors, but it's so very hard to keep up with where you are sourcing the information. So in the draft, the purple is Chapter 405B, and it's just pulled in. The blue are from our commercial design standards. Green is new, it's proposed from the Long Range Planning Committee. And so this is the draft that was shown to you in October with some additional changes from the professional review. And so things that are highlighted in yellow are things that have been recommended for changes that staff feels like that's a good thing. It should work. The blue needs a little bit more conversation about. But basically, the ordinance is drafted in the same manner as the rest of the site plan ordinance. So its purpose, applicability, general standards, and definitions. Those are the beginnings. The applicability, what's important to know is this doesn't apply to single family or two family homes. So that's the same. It's all projects going through a site plan or subdivision process. There's general standards and definitions, nothing really significant. And these are numbered if you follow along, because the next slides are going to show you some crude sort of imagery of how what this actually might mean. So on number 5, and you'll see that minimum landscaping required, all of the language is in green. This is all new proposed language. And so this particular example site is a 1 acre site, 10,000 square foot retail space. And so number 5 talks about what's required per type of use, and it is directly correlated with the impervious limits. So that was one of the changes that staff recommended after multifamily. Long range had it at 20%, but you could have 85% impervious. So to keep that in mind, change that. So this is based on use. You have a percentage of your site that requires landscaping, and then a percentage of a number of trees and shrubs. And so that's your basic starting point. And then everything that follows feeds into that number. So some sites will do much more than this minimum, but at a bare minimum, this is what you'll get on the site. So this particular 1 acre site would have 13 trees and 26 shrubs minimum planted.
And today it wouldn't require any.
Today we only require landscaping in parking areas,
Yeah.
and when we do require some screening, there's a table in your packet too that seeks to tell you what we have today and what's different. But this is different, and it's sort of organized, so we have something to say you've achieved some goals.
By the way, I think this imagery looks fine. I don't think it's really.
It's my Excel spreadsheet, landscape plan. I know Angela's like really on them. I could probably help you with it. So this is a basic, but what, this is not PowerPoint, so it's a little different. Let's see. So what I wanted to show you for number 6 talks about buffer yards and streetscapes. And you'll see that it's got a table and all the text is purple in the ordinance. And so purple exists. It's just capturing it from all the different zoning districts. And so this is where your streetscape is. It's that back of property line. That's what that means. And so for this particular one, I just chose 10 feet. And what's new in this section is that there's a requirement for a tree every 30 feet. I have heard from professionals and developers that they would like it to be 40 feet. So that's one of those decision points. But right now it's at 30 feet. And then when you get into number 7, you'll see residential adjacency. Again, in that table, it's all purple. It's all pulled from all the different zoning districts. So you can really see, and the purpose of this, pulling this into these tables is to see once we start drilling down those particular zoning districts, we can see what we might want to change and how it lines up with others. And so that's why all this is pulled together. So originally, long-range planning had taken a look at it, doing it by use. But then once I got really into the ordinance changes, I just wanted to capture what we have now to make it really clear. And so this particular site, no residential adjacency, but if they had it, it would show up on the side. Then you get into parking lot landscaping. Parking lot landscaping is one we have right now. We require 10 to 15% landscaping for your parking lot. It's probably, the applicants would tell you, oh, it's okay, we just sign it and we're always meeting it. And so it's hard to review it because where's the line at, what's included? So this is trying to help us have some actual accountability. So there's a proposal for landscape islands. It's 1 per 15, and in the islands, you need a tree and shrubs. And so you get a minimal number of parking lot screening, excuse me, parking lot islands. So you can see on these, but again, just to remind you, all of these go towards that minimum landscape count. So it's all combined.
I have a quick, I'm
Mhm.
sorry to interrupt you. It's just popped into my head. So we get these guys, and gals to do all of this. And then time goes by and then the trees start dying or this or that. Is there any way to
Yes,
strongly suggest,
yes.
i.e. force people
That's
to keep up
in-
their landscaping?
Number 17.
Oh, okay.
Only this middle part is the lengthy
All right.
part. I just really wanted to show you what it means. This was helpful for long range to see. And so you have the parking lot screening, and then you get into number, and this is your entryway. So the parking lot requires entryway trees. But again, these trees also can count as those streetscape trees. So you can double count things. It's quite all right. And then you get into vehicular use area. So this one really has to do with this long range planning committee wanted to do a 10-foot border around everything. I did decrease this to 5. That's what we started with, and then we increased it, but I thought 5 was probably a reasonable number. So this has a 5-foot perimeter around your entire site where you have any asphalt pavement parking. So that's proposed. There's also in this section, just some clarification about how big the islands are and things of that nature. And then you get into foundation landscaping. This is number 9. And so this one we have on the books right now in the commercial design standards. There is a question that I have, if you all think it would, right now, the commercial design standards and our site plan ordinance, this is a little bit weedy. It only refers to some zoning districts, not all, and it misses some. But my question is, foundation planting, I do not know if this should apply to LI and I zoned properties. I feel very comfortable with the parking lot screening and the perimeter screening and all of that, but I'm not sure if foundation planting is necessary with the 5-foot sidewalk and the 5-foot planting bed on all 3 sides. So it's just something to think about.
Me, I'm all for more plantings.
And that's quite all right too. The way it's written now, it applies across the board,
Yeah.
but that's just something that maybe, to
Yeah.
consider.
The way it's written now, it does apply.
It does
across the
apply,
board?
yes, it does apply. So there's also been some concern from the development side that this is it's somewhat a suburban approach to landscaping. You have this sidewalk landscaping building. And so are there options for urban sort of plantings where that's not required? And so one approach, there's a section that we do have for waivers. So that could be something that could be a planning board waiver. If it's a truly an urban setting and maybe they have trees and tree grates and it's quite a bit different types. It's not your Starbucks site. It's not Hannaford's. It's something quite different. And that might be an option.
Why wouldn't they want to have plant, what does it matter? I mean, what's urban versus?
I think it's just the idea that the building is closer to the pedestrian. So there's
Oh.
less space in between. So it's
Okay.
really getting that building on top of the sidewalk and really moving. You might have planters, you might have some different options,
Right,
but having this consistent row of shrubbery all around just might not fit in with that.
yeah, to me, it's like, well, that's what we expect, so make your plans accordingly,
Mhm.
that's me. And I'm trying to, I mean, in the way I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking the bigger picture
Mhm.
of, I'm even gonna go way out there with climate change and whatever. The more planting and more trees, the healthier, your environment and whatever will be. So, I mean, I don't know, but I'm also
I mean, I
not
would
on the
just-
planning board.
I would just call it what I think it is, which is, this is the CPD, right, where it's gonna be walkable.
Mhm.
And so rather than this kind of traditional Scarborough mindset we have where everything is a standalone parking lot with a sidewalk that's
Yeah,
has a certain amount of islands and shrubbery. The entire point of the CPD is to be walkable and to not have all of that impervious surface right around each building. And so thinking big picture that there's gonna be development in town that isn't necessarily what we already have,
Mhm.
does
Hmm.
this apply to an area like that?
And this could even, that same thinking could apply to some of your TVC districts too, because they allow buildings a lot closer.
Be an example of TVC.
Oak Hill
Okay.
and Dunstan, those are TVC zoned properties. So yeah, I think that I'd like to add some waiver language. There's some ideas that I think, to your point, that you still get the landscaping, but maybe it's not, and it's a trade-off, right? Maybe it's in
Yeah.
a different location,
but
but
I don't wanna give them too many hours.
Right, I know,
Right.
and neither do I, but I can see some significant design
Yeah,
limitations
yeah.
behind, that are unintentional design limitations that
Right.
we're putting in place for an entire master plan that is based on being walkable.
yeah,
right.
true.
Okay, let's see, and then there's one more. So this one, in this particular example, the site was small enough and the building was small enough, we didn't meet our minimum. So they go back to the overall and they still need to provide 3 trees. And so they've added 3 more trees. And I'll skip ahead, but what I've added to the ordinance at the end to make my life really easy is a table that will be part of the ordinance that's required on site plans, and thou shalt fill it out.
I saw that.
And
That's good.
It's just a really good way. It works you through the math and it tries to take away any questions that you have. So then,
I have a quick question for you.
sure.
How much flexibility is there for a developer to select preferred native species versus acceptable alternative species?
All right.
Getting ahead.
Let me get to that one because the next few are, sorry. The next few are kind of boring, but then we'll get to the good one. I promise. So 10 is screening. And that really, the only thing that we've done is identify that the fence needs to be at least 5 foot tall for dumpster. So we just put some, that's it. For outdoor storage, we added some language that the planning board could take a look at where, for screening, or merchandise containers with site plan review. And then for landscape preservation and protection, we didn't require any preservation, but we said, if you're going to do it, these are the measures that you take. So we've identified that. There is,
No blue tarps,
excuse me,
no blue tarps.
right.
Oh, come on.
So then we added, I brought in, site amenities. Oops, this one's order's wrong, but I brought in site amenities from the commercial design centers in a different section. And so just to find that it's a public entrance, not a major entrance. And then we added bicycle facilities. So this one is one you, the Long Range Planning Committee put one bicycle facility for every 10 vehicle parking spaces. This could be, you know, fewer or greater, but that's how they defined it. And then snow storage is defined. The really important thing about snow storage is we really wanted to protect our stormwater areas.
Yeah.
So you're not just pushing your, so there's some requirements in there that is new language.
And is there, I'm sorry, I couldn't look at that particular thing real closely, but even to mind melting? Because when you plow stuff up, as it melts, it leaves all behind a lot of
Mhm.
garbage.
Right.
Or can, so they have to get that all cleaned up, right?
Right.
They have to stay on top of that.
Yes, and they have to show where that is on site plans, and if they cannot remove it, they have to put in an agreement or a note on the site plan about how they're gonna take it off of
Okay.
there.
Okay.
We've been doing this really through the planning board
Oh,
process,
sure.
but this is just
I
sort of
just wanted
solidified.
to, yeah.
I think people have been doing a pretty good job on that. So then we get to number 16, the fun one, the approved plant list. This is the one. This is
Bigger
what
one.
started it all. So, the list itself is even more colorful. So you have purple, which was already an existing, green, staff additions. I don't know how I got them, but somewhere through the process, they're there. Really through probably forestry reviews and different reviews. The orange is what was proposed by the Conservation Commission, and then red was proposed by the professional review. So we've gone through this several times. I do have a few other comments that I received last week, just some little tweaks and cleanups for a couple of trees. But the real question is what you're comfortable with requiring people use. And so what we have is a list of preferred native species and acceptable alternative species. And it really should just say preferred species because native has a lot of connotations depending on who you're speaking to.
Right.
And so most of what I would say, these are defined as they're native to the northeastern part of America. So there's a definition for that. As it's written right now, so for trees, if you are required to do a large tree, a minimum of 60% of all your required trees shall be selected from the preferred species list. So if you have 10 trees required, 6 of them have to be from the preferred species. But the thing about trees is that all of them have to be selected from preferred or alternative. There's no off the list.
Oh,
tree.
okay.
And so that's why the list has gone back and forth, and I'm pretty comfortable with where we are with that.
Seems very complicated.
I think so.
I was going through.
The request has been to take that number down to 40%, that they have to be the preferred native species, but as it's written, it's at 60%. So that's trees. And then when we get into shrubs, so shrub is the high level word, but you could use ornamental shrubs, perennials, ferns, and grasses. And so the way it's written now is that 60% of all your required shrubs have to be selected from the preferred species list. And then you can do up to 25%, I call them rogue. You can do rogue shrubs that are not on the list. We'll look at them and make sure they're not on the non-invasive, but that gives some flexibility. And then the other 15% would have to be from the other list or more preferred. So again, the request has been to take that number down to 40 as well. So.
Question for you.
Mhm.
So the grouping, it's a little hard to read the title, but you have choices here among large deciduous trees,
Yeah.
small deciduous trees, large evergreen trees,
Mhm.
small evergreen trees, and ornamentals.
Ornamentals, yes.
You just have smaller.
Yes.
So is there any kind of recommended percentage for those?
So that's what's called out in the actual document.
Okay.
So say you have to do the one street tree, one large tree for every 30 feet.
Okay,
So those would be your 6, and you can do the large deciduous or the large evergreen.
Right.
There are some instances where you can swap a large tree for 2 ornamental trees. And so these are the ornamental trees.
I'm very pleased to see that Highness Regina or pitch pine.
Yes.
And Jean Marie will correct my Latin pronunciation here, but that's the tree that Pine Point was named after.
I'm gonna put that one in. So
Thank good.
Yeah.
that's a green tree.
Wow.
But
The other thing is, so I hear is that it's often confused. I said, whenever I go through this, I feel like singing that Monty Python song. But the other part of this that I really liked is that was preferred, pitch pine was preferred over the substitute, which was the Austrian.
The Austrian, yeah.
right.
Which is, you know, you do see them around. They're
Yeah.
not-
Yes.
they're not as big.
So that's the tree list.
So
It's very
It's-
comprehensive.
Really?
It is,
Oh.
it is incredibly comprehensive.
And bee friendly, a lot of those, it's bee
That's
friendly, which I
really
like.
what we were really looking for
Yeah.
in the shrub category.
Yeah.
Are those species that could really encourage habitat and.
Yeah.
So then, we updated the minimum sizes, that are required. And then for number 17, we have installation guarantee and maintenance.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we did add, that actually came out of long range planning is that what we will do is we'll give you a CO and you pay a performance guarantee for all the things that are missing. And oftentimes the things that are missing are your landscaping.
Oh, yeah.
And so we put this requirement in that you only have 6 months to remedy that. So, that's a lot better than what we have.
Yes.
Because right now, if you do that, and we've been better about this too. We also have set amounts we charge people for performance guarantees. So
Oh, good.
we have some small performance guarantees in town. They're like, I don't want to plan it. You keep my money. And so this
Yeah,
this
you
language
want
will
it
help
to,
us.
yeah, you want it to hurt enough
Yeah.
that they'll do it. Yeah.
And so the maintenance is included. We did add some language about, it should include alternatives to regular mowing and pesticide if possible, just to put that out there. And then what I intend to do is to create sort of a design criteria manual with these standard notes. So applicants can just grab, and we want to do that for lighting too, just to
Yeah.
make things easier and simple. And then you have a guarantee. And so the guarantee part, it doesn't start until the landscaping's been installed. It doesn't, that's just to clarify.
Yeah.
And then we have this new language that plants that die must be replaced in kind unless another species is more appropriate. Maybe it died for a reason. But we did include that in. So
Okay, yeah.
it will be hard to, I'm just gonna say it's hard to find when plants die. It's just kind of a drive around, sort of see them. I've had that challenge in other communities. But it's kind of nice, once you know what's been approved, you sort of take ownership, or I do at least, I'm like, oh, that plant's dead. And you call them up and you say you have to replace it, but that's how we'll have to enforce it.
Well, and I think primarily this is good to have so that now you do have the grounds to enforce that.
Right.
Whereas now we're.
Right.
And we had an instance on Gallery Boulevard where they wanted to take down some very old.
Oh, right.
Or older trees and over,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay. But you have to replace them
Yeah.
with and they have to be,
Large
and they
trees.
did that, and it was
Yeah.
really, really great. So that's what we're working through.
Oh.
And then again, the landscape plan required just adding the table, and then we have a waiver section that gives planning board some flexibility for some things. So that is it in all its colorful glory.
Yeah,
For you.
thoughts, guys. Again.
I'm impressed that you really trying to pull all this together. I think that's a big improvement. So, but help me with this. Is this obviously a benefit in terms of, I would think the developers, because they're gonna be able to kind of get it all in one fell swoop. But from a standpoint of the planning folks, does this, is this also good for you, better for you?
Certainly, yes.
So at the same time, though, do you have a feeling that this improvement, may make things go faster than they would have gone otherwise, and maybe not be as subject to scrutiny and review by the public and by the council?
I think they could. I think you'll get more consistency. I think anytime, the whole point of having ordinances is for consistency, so people know what they're supposed to do and then where they can have conversations. And so I think so. I know with lighting, we just get the same, it's consistent. It's not even a discussion anymore. These are the things you have to do, and it's not a negotiation point at planning board.
Right.
So there'll still be some opportunities for waivers and some flexibility, but there's still some base things that when we review it as planning staff and say, yep, they meet our requirements. And that gives the applicants a leg up because they can say to planning board, we meet your requirements. Don't make us do other stuff. And then the planning board says, you met our requirements. That's great.
We'll make it easier. for
I
planning
think
board.
so. I think
Yeah.
it'll make it easier.
So I just want to make sure that it will also help the reviewers. You know, the committees like ours and also the council to be thorough and deliberate. I think there's some benefit to having things sort of more sequential at the end. You know, not that you're trying to help people to not hold, but then,
Right.
you know, there would be time for this to age through some process. So that's the main thing that I'm concerned about. We, obviously we're getting something, we want to make sure that we don't lose things that also will allow us to be deliberate, thoughtful, and effective.
I don't have any particular questions because I think we were asking them right along, so.
We asked all along and we've seen something. So is the request to send this to planning stuff?
Are you guys ready to send it
It
to
would-
council?
I would request it go to council in late March or early April.
Okay.
I'm not.
You're not in a rush.
No,
Yeah.
because this will come with about 14 ordinance amendments.
Yeah.
To make these tables and things. So even the first meeting in April, I'm okay with, but it'd go to council for the first reading to refer back to planning board.
Okay.
So that process. we can-
Can I have a motion?
I will make a motion to. What is my motion? I will make a motion to refer this, there's the word I was looking for, refer this to the council as written.
Second,
All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought this was just softening us up for the height requirement, but it was gonna slide that in.
Trying to wear us down.
This is the really big one. I'm super proud of long range. I know they're getting really tired of these very tedious sort of, we're almost done.
Yeah, but when it's done, it'll be. such a
It'll be
big
really
difference.
nice. Yeah.
All right, what's with this height thing?
All right, so let's go. So this one, again, the computer. So this one came into my office as a request, for an applicant in the TVC zone, at Oak Hill. Really wanting us to look at, some height restrictions. And so TVC has a 45-foot tall limit on height, and that equates to a 4-story building. This particular applicant asked if we could go up to 55 feet for the 4-story building, really to allow some flexibility for some parapets and some screening around a utility elevator shaft.
Right.
And so they sent us the renderings of what it would could look like. This would be kind of what it might look like on site. This is very specific, but when I took the request to Long Range Planning Committee in December, just presented them with really a very basic option. Let me give you a little bit of background on where TVC is, because it would apply to all the district, right? So it's not just this particular applicant. So
Quick question.
Mhm.
One comment, question first. I thought this was TVC 3 initially, the application.
no, I think it got messed up in translation when other people were, but it's just TVC.
Okay. But one, number 2, can you go back to Sebago Technic's photos? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's the 4-story building right next to the McDonald's. McDonald's is on the curb. The four-story building, we don't know how far back it is, but it looks lower than
The grade.
you know, come on. I didn't fall off the front of the yesterday. But come on.
Well, let me get through this and I'll show you some real life
Yeah,
examples
go.
too.
Behave yourself.
So, yeah, this is just something that they gave us. So the TV district,
These guys.
it is, the village district, it really is all about mixture of uses, retail, office, residential, a little bit of everything. Sidewalks, landscaping, village scale and character. So that's it. The TVC is in Oak Hill along Route 1 and in Dunston along Route 1. So that's where we're talking about. We also have a TVC too, in another district, but these are the areas that we're talking about. So these are some samples that I took or grabbed from around town just for some perspective. Like the Gateway Apartments, it's 3 stories. I forget the height on this one. I think it was around 40. Carrier Woods was 40 feet, 3 stories. So the Uplands is one of the taller ones. It's 52 feet. It has a 4-story building. And so the CPD allows 75 feet.
Right.
So this one is that. So this one is more in line with the height that this request is for. Piper Shores, 60 feet. The Avesta Housing Project on the low side is 30 and it goes up to 30. So just, these are the taller buildings that we have in town. We don't have anything any taller right now.
Quick question. The CZ is contract zone, so that was a contract zone amendment or application.
That was
Piper Shores is the contract.
That whole thing was,
Yeah, so they have their own.
The Meadows.
yes,
And then
why?
Carrier, well, I'm just asking.
I'd like to know where these things are, that's it.
Yeah.
So Carrier Woods is on
So Muzzy.
Muzzy.
Yep.
And it's
Yeah.
TVC 3. And then the Gateway is on on Igus.
So is this sort of in a fashion trying to say, well, we're kind of doing this already, so the
Nope.
request that is in front of us.
It's just me. I will be in December. It's just when somebody comes into my office and has this, it's a very factual conversation. Like, here's where this is. Here's
Right.
what we have. What do you want to do? And so that's really where the conversation in December went. And so the original proposal, I said, we can achieve what they're requesting by adding some flexibility in the ordinance for planning board to have some discretion for screening purposes, not allowing a full story. So that was my original, very conservative staff approach. In December, and you can read it from the minutes, there was a lot of discussion about, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity to really maybe meet some other goals in the comp plan. Maybe we can achieve some affordability, or we can have some, decrease impervious cover. And so there was a lot of sort of, maybe we should think about this a different way. So I was asked at that meeting to bring back some options, like a 65-foot height, the original proposal, and a 75-foot height. So in January, I brought that, and much to my dismay, expecting a 5-minute discussion and a selection, we got into a different discussion because it was a different time. And so what ended up happening was there was more discussion around really perception and how height, while we are not proposing a change to density
Right.
or anything else matter, we're just saying you could go up taller, the perception would be that we did. So, and that's a fair assessment. I think that can definitely have some validity to it. So there was some more discussion around that. And what we ended up with is a proposal on the far right that was a minimum 2 stories or 20 foot for 50% of the building footprint exists now. So we have a minimum requirement in TVC of 20 feet. So they changed it up to 45 feet to up to 5 stories or 60 feet. And so you can see in this table the iterations. This is the first proposal where it allowed some planning board discretion, not increasing the amount of stories, just some flexibility. The zoning administrator and I would love to have a little bit of flexibility for height, because we have seen this, and I've seen this in other places where, ooh, if I could have like 2 feet, I could do this, or,
Right.
and so that seemed a really fair way to maybe consider it. And proposal 1 and proposal 2 are what came out of the December meeting. And then the recommendation is what came out of the January meeting. So this chart is just a summary of all the height in all the zoning districts, so you can see how they compare and contrast.
Quick question. So proposal two was the one that came out of the December meeting?
No, so December, they wanted to see the original and what a 65 and a 75. They just wanted to have all three of them.
And that was the one where we had the conversation probably.
Yes, but in January is when we had the conversation about Maple
I missed
Avenue.
that.
You missed the December.
Okay, the January one was the one.
The January one was the one you were at, and then,
Sure. Hold on, first thought.
and that was the one where they ended up sort of in this middle ground,
One I missed.
5 stories or 60 feet.
The notes are worth reading and watching the.
I did.
actually Watching the videos. So this was Peter Frelinger's.
Yes,
Motion.
and it
That passed.
It passed, actually 3-2, because there's only 5 voting members,
Great.
so.
There's a lot of onlookers. in
What do
that.
you mean?
LRPC.
So
What do you mean this was Peter Frelinger's?
he made the motion for this
He
one,
just made a motion.
for this recommendation. This
The
one,
one part.
this far right.
What were
So-
the objections? Remind me.
So,
I'm sorry.
oh, that's okay, no, I think I have them. So Marvin Gates was objected it because he wanted the original proposal. He felt the perception to going
Yeah.
higher would be implying denser and more growth. And then Alan objected to it because he thought it was too high to start with. And so maybe we should be more incremental.
The thing I would add, there was a very, very strong discussion in favor of the benefits of greater density and higher height.
Right,
That were both voiced by Ron Saunders, who said big affordable housing
Right.
opportunities, also traffic calming opportunities by
Right.
encouraging mass transit.
Right.
There was one other one, but she was really quite
right.
forceful in those comments.
And Peter was in that same mindset. There was a lot of discussion, but again, those weren't things we were changing.
Right,
So, and,
they still have to meet.
and they're
that.
still, right, and like we discussed that
This just.
at our
this
last long
just-
range planning,
Changes the shape of the building.
we need to go, we can go back
But it can
and
make it
have that
better,
discussion,
but
but it
not
needs to
getting
include a
flat.
lot of other things.
Cause you can add a pitch to the roof, for example, that you may not be able to do
Yes.
otherwise.
Right.
But this
Solar,
started off as a conversation about screening the top of the building to like hide something.
This started out as a request, and the way I said, you know, we could achieve this with just allowing some flexibility for screening. And then you would show it through a site plan to planning board, and planning board could go, okay,
Yeah.
that height, oh, that's a bad idea. You're in so-and-so's backyard. Or they could say,
Yeah.
oh, that height is really gonna work because the grade change is legitimate and no one's gonna see that 4 foot.
Right.
Huh.
I mean, frankly, I can live with a 5 stories or 60 feet, because remember, it's gotta go through a whole planning board process and has to meet every other requirement. But that's me.
So sorry,
Have to-
I don't know that my opinion on the recommendation is necessarily the action right now in terms of whether or not, so again, right, we're
Right.
deciding whether this is ready to go to council.
Yeah,
I don't have any additional questions.
Yeah.
I clearly, a significant amount of committee work went into this recommendation and everything is here that I would want to see at the council level.
okay.
So I have a slightly different view,
I knew you did. That's why I was trying to tease this out.
and he's been the same time. Very effective with that. So I would say, this for me is symbolic. It's symbolic in several ways. One is, we don't really have any rendering for what this would look like. You know, next door to McDonald's or a mile away, whatever, you know, but
Sure, and hold on, yeah.
you know, I believe this would be an incredible symbolic statement that here goes Scarborough. You thought we were done, you thought we're slowing down, you thought the development's slowing down, you thought that we're gonna update the GMO and show you actually how many building permits have been approved and not pulled yet. Well, guess what? Kaboom. You thought it was quiet and we were just gonna take a pause, forget all of that. Because we're going big.
Well, it's funny when you say that, and, not to interrupt you, but I just, but I'm gonna leave it. I just recently had an experience of coming off from Falmouth, you know, off Bucknam Road and whatever. I didn't realize they'd built those tall buildings there.
Right.
So I haven't been in downtown Falmouth in a couple of years and I was like, what the heck? You know, so.
They do, one of those is 5 stories and then one of them are.
Yeah, I was
4
gonna ask you if you knew what the height.
We actually
So I-
went on a tour.
I don't know.
last year.
So it should be similar to what was being from here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep, the
I mean,
taller one.
Thank goodness we went first on
I know.
somebody else was.
Can we talk more about planning board discretion? Just like, do we have other ordinances where something like a 20% increase or some built-in metric is in place that the planning board has that kind of ability?
We have quite a few waivers built in, so we require 25-foot drive aisles.
Yeah, I guess
Everybody
that's
asks
a
for a
good way to
24-foot
frame
drive
the
aisle.
waiver.
We have some standards around, architectural fenestration and, articulation. And some of those are a little bit more subjective, and so the planning board can say, try again, raise this. So we do have some flexibility, and that's, I think this is probably a good candidate for that sort of thing, especially since we're clearing up a lot of our other things that are more, and it could even be written with parameters around it, much like the waivers in here. Like you could request this if you don't have residential adjacency, if you are a minimum number of feet back from the street or something to that effect to address any concerns that the additional height you might have. But again, that would not raise the amount of stories that you could do. It would just be design features.
And my question to both of you is do we wanna muck with this? Or do we wanna take it to council and have all 7 weigh in on it and come up with,
Well, and that's where, I guess I will weigh in on my opinion. This isn't gonna pass me at council. And so
Okay.
am I sending something to council that I'm not in support of?
But you're only one.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So fundamentally, if this is cooked and this is the recommendation, I don't have any additional questions at the committee level. I'm
Right.
gonna vote to pass this to council. But if I'm being candid, this does not have my
Right.
support right now. So.
And let me build on that. That doesn't have much support either. Big surprise.
You don't have
Well, we can
You
get
don't have
that.
to end.
It neither makes.
And to be perfectly honest, can I be perfectly candid too?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to support it because we didn't do all the other things
All right, then let's
that
send it
you
back.
need to do. If you're going to increase height, I have to decrease impervious cover. This has
What's
to
that?
go, right now, you can have, I think, up to 85%. In TVC, I can have 85% impervious. If I give you an extra story, and to be fair, if you use density factors, you
Yeah.
could actually get
Yeah.
that needs to go down. So that
Right.
needs to be more like 60% if you get an extra story.
Yeah.
So there's more work to make me feel comfortable about it.
At least you would say that.
That is,
And I think that's a really good work for us to do.
that was easy.
But
Surprising.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's been completely thought out with all the
Good.
other things to
Okay.
make me feel comfortable about it.
So what do you wanna make a motion? To send it back, who do we wanna send it back to? Who should we send, who do you want it to go back to?
If you send it back, I am actually working on, you could send it back to,
Staff?
you could send it back to long range. But we have,
I'm nervous or
I
apprehensive
know.
to send it back to long range without feedback other than to just
Right,
say.
I
we
agree.
didn't like what-
That's fine.
right, to fully do all the things. Are you comfortable with the idea of adding some discretion?
I'll be honest, like that my leaning, I would prefer planning boards see a specific site plan and say, in this instance, given
It
its
makes sense.
location,
Yeah.
you know, I would be willing to give an additional 15 feet, whatever the screen, whatever. So planning board discretion, and when specifically when you frame it, like we have waivers, we have
Mhm.
processes like that, that makes more sense to me than blanket, just changing the ordinance.
I'm aligned with a lot of that. The one thing I would add is if we need to do more massaging to figure out how the pieces fit together, it just doesn't make sense to me to go high. And we should go in with a lower proposal, then work it and see how it moves up from there.
Yeah.
The other issue I've got, we got no detail on this applicant, you know, it's who is the
It's
applicant,
Steve Berg,
correct?
Steve Berg.
So I don't know, but I haven't seen much of his, proposal yet, other than the Sebago visual, that I really don't like.
Well, and I don't,
See, but I don't like to frame it like that, because I don't want to do this as.
It would be,
Right,
it would be
exactly.
zoning
That's why
district.
I'm-
Yes. But we got the reason we got here is a test case, and we so, but
So where do we want to send it back? Because the clock's running and I know Mr. Gallagher needs to be somewhere for Valentine's Day. 8:30.
So can we just give it back to the director of planning and ask the director of planning to propose, where it goes from here? I mean, I'm more comfortable with that. I
We need
trust
a
your
motion
judgment.
for that, or can we just, is that just a?
I think the guidance is understood.
Yeah,
And I think some of the things that Autumn referenced, you'd have interest in hearing more about. as well,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Services and those
Yep.
kind of pieces.
so get back, so take it back.
So, but am I safe to tell this applicant that we're not moving forward with
Yes.
any of this at this time? Okay,
Please.
great.
Thank you.
Thank
Cool,
you.
thanks
So we
very
don't
much.
actually vote on it?
I said, we're just giving it back.
We're just saying, we don't even want to look at it.
No.
Okay.
All right, last but certainly not least, cannabis establishments. I know, but here's where I'm going with this one. We're not going to accomplish anything tonight on that. We're just gonna start laying the groundwork for where we're heading, so that everyone knows. That I'm not gonna sit here and I'm gonna hear, 18 different proposals and whatever. I will be very clear, and I've told everybody, you probably saw my article in the Counselor Corner. And this is Jean Marie speaking, just Jean Marie, it's not this committee, it's none of the other counselors, but the way I'm looking at this is. Now that we've had experience with cannabis growing operations, the cultivation. I think personally that I would like to see us move to an overlay that's in perhaps the Washington Avenue Industrial Park. And then it's a fancy legal word, to amortize it, in other words, slowly pull it out of all other areas of town. And we've been told, given advice from our attorney, that would be up to a 5-year process. Now, there are some other things to it, and there were some good questions asked this evening by one of the speakers that I'm gonna have Liam speak to. But all I'm doing right now is laying the groundwork so that we can then hear from everybody. And remember that, please email. I like emails because people can get into the details and give me real specifics. And I know I'm more a visual person to see it as to hear it. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'm gonna let you guys speak what your thoughts are too at this point, since we don't have anything out there
Sure.
to look at.
No, I appreciate you putting this on the agenda, just so that we can level set everyone's expectations. We know that rolling this back or changing directions is gonna be a process, and that it's gonna take time, to do that. We can't make any changes.
Right.
Just, by snapping our fingers. We appreciate the residents' patience up to this point and their participation. I said this at our last meeting, I am very grateful, and continue to be grateful for the efforts that are made by the business owners and establishments. I have not had a single negative interaction with anybody on either side. I genuinely believe that everyone was working in the best interest of arriving at a solution where the residents were happy and that the odor was contained. We have come to the look in the mirror moment where we acknowledge that that's not what's happening. And despite our best efforts to put in place something new, we just have not been successful. And so at this point, I feel like we should all be really proud of the work that we did. Nobody just threw their hands up and said, we're done, we're walking away from this. But I think at this point, we have to acknowledge that we need to change something for the residents that are being impacted by these cultivation licensees. And I'm in support of doing whatever that looks like to move these cultivation facilities away from our residences.
Yeah, I support both those statements. I look back on the work that was done a couple of years ago, when we adopted the cannabis ordinances for Scarborough. It took 18 months and step by step, and we had to do it all over again. We probably would have done this differently, but then it got complicated by, an error with our GIS map. So what happened was not intentional. It was not intentional, it was accidental. So I think because of that, we're trying to push the reset button. Not trying to decry any of the efforts that were made by staff or by residents with this process, but it admittedly doesn't work. And so we're trying to find the path forward that will balance the rights of the business people, with those of the residents. So I think this is the right way to go. And we'll do it steadily and thoroughly, and hopefully it won't take too long, but I like what we framed out, and I support it completely.
Mr. Gallagher.
So, following along kind of the conversations that have happened among the council and the ordinance committee over the last few months, and with a new revised moratorium in place, I think some of the questions I'm hearing from the council is really trying to understand what the implications or impact would be to a zoning change with regard to where cultivation facilities are permitted. And so we have begun to explore that. Again, as the questions have been raised through the discussion about what is the town's ability to essentially phase out duly locally acknowledged or with local approval medical cultivation facilities or other medical cannabis establishments established prior to 12/13 of 18. And I think that the guidance from legal counsel at this point is that your ability to remove those, even with a phased out, is limited. And I believe the question at public comment was, how many of those establishments do we believe exist? We have done some preliminary kind of cursory review of what records we have of cannabis establishments in town. Again, our cursory review indicated 5 to 6 establishments with names that we recognize that are currently licensed. There's some additional review that needs to happen there about was that the specific area that they had the local authorization, because the name certainly I recognize just from my review. There's a question about because with regard to land use and non-conforming uses, essentially the expectation is that if you change the zoning, those establishments can continue to operate. Again, this phase out provision is something different. I think it remains a question about those establishments that may have had local authorization for cannabis use, but the ownership has changed since that time period. That is a question that remains outstanding. But certainly establishments established either by use or with a licensee after that 12/13/18 date, it is legal's opinion that they would be subject to a phase. So again, there's still some additional review, and certainly if the council were to continue down this path, I expect an interactive process with licensees to better understand what records they have against ours. I also might put out there with regard to zoning changes. whether, the council, rather than, because right now there's largely 3 areas of town in which we have licensed establishments. 2 of the 3 have documented issues and concerns. Whether buffers should be looked at, if not outright removing cultivation from any of those large light industrial or industrial zones, whether there's a buffer that could be considered moving forward. Again, just a question, I'm not making a recommendation. So those are, just to speak to the ongoing issues, and I'm not going to rehash territory or Councilor Sider's comments. I do believe that everyone was well intentioned and made a good faith, more than a good faith effort to resolve this issue, absent these council changes that you're contemplating. There have been 73 reports of odor since the council passed those changes back in August of 2023. So again, there's some level. Irrespective of the underlying zoning change, certainly the enforcement piece is another area that the council has suggested there might be an opportunity to look at. The mechanism that is defined in the ordinance, there was a rationale behind that. I think what the feedback I think the council is hearing at this point is that threshold is too high by virtue of how many residents exist in those neighborhoods. Again, I'm not offering an opinion, simply sharing what we've heard from comments. And I guess I would suggest the council review our good neighbor ordinance with how they handle other nuisance claims, be it noise or light. Once a complaint comes in, someone is dispatched. And so right now our licensing ordinance kind of grants enforcement authority to the code enforcement office. I think that could reasonably be expanded to the police department as well. I have had preliminary conversations with Chief Holmquist. I made him aware. There was initially some reluctance to put that burden on our patrol staff. I think at this point, with some reasonable response, again, this is not something that's going to become a priority call, but as we have people out patrolling, I think that they have perhaps a nose that's just as good as anyone's, and so verifying those complaints. And then I might suggest the council, again, there are other licensing processes in town in which what would otherwise be an administrative renewal gets remanded back to council at their request. We've obviously put some of those parameters in place with licenses, but I look at our innkeeper's license. We obviously had a situation in recent memory where so many licenses or establishments with so many complaints were brought back to council for a discussion. So again, I think we have some things to draw from locally, whether it's the good neighbor ordinance or innkeeper's ordinance, to suggest that we can look at how we handle our relicensing or enforcement process. So I would offer that up for the council for some discussion.
When we talk about enforcement, is it specifically, can you remind me if it's specifically laid out in the wording that the party responsible is the property owner, is the lessee, like?
It can be both.
Okay.
So again, if it's very, we theoretically have, so for instance, in our Washington Avenue, we have one cultivation facility in that. If we got an odor complaint,
Right.
we would
So
be
you know
able
what
to-
I'm getting
probably with
to.
some level of certainty. There's also in the ordinance a carve out though for if that cannot be determined, then you go to the building owner to have that conversation.
Thank you for reminding me.
So I wanted to respond to Liam's suggestions. I think there are 2 or 3 things that could be considered there that you mentioned. I wouldn't rule, I don't want to solve for this, but I think exploring the application with a simple process, could be tied in with good neighbor, instead of following the limits. We agree is kind of it's cumbersome and hard to really demonstrate an issue when there may be one of order. So number 1, number 2, I like what he had to say in terms of looking at relicensing and perhaps not making it so automatic. And meanwhile, just proceeding on the path of trying to cap and then amortize the existing businesses. So I think there's some good possibilities there. But the main thing I think for us is this overlay idea that Jean Maria skipped around. So I think there's 2 or 3 things that are there. I've seen the legal opinions and I know the sentiment But the fact of the matter is, for cultivation, the only way to really solve for this is a closed system, a charcoal, type of filter system. And we think understand that that's likely not feasible with the Snow Canyon Road facility, where there's the greatest concentration. The other point that we'll have to deal with at some stage is that, trying to verify, if there is in fact, any odor associated with the manufacturing facilities. So anyway, I think there's 2 or 3 things that we could work at, but the number one thing for me would be to try to work on the territory aspects of it, the zoning aspects. And,
Right.
And the amortization thing at the same time, too.
Because there's gonna be a drawdown, I'm gonna call it a drawdown for lack of a better term. From where we're at today to where do we wanna be in, let's say, 5 years. But in the meantime, if we've got people in violation, what are we doing and how are we?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Procedurally, Liam, what do we need to do, or what recommendations do we need to have a bit ready for the council to not allow for new licenses when the moratorium ends? Or do you think procedurally we just, I know that so long as we're working on it, we can continue the moratorium, but in light of the fact that I don't think that the council wants to see new licenses being issued. What do we need to do between now and when that moratorium
Good
ends?
question.
Well, I think that you would need to change, I think zoning is what you need to address. And so that's the question that would need to be answered. And then again, what that time frame looks like. Again, the 5-year is being held out as something that has been vetted through the judicial system, through the billboard law, with a case that's 50 or something. So again, there's some degree of confidence that that's something that's been supported. It doesn't have to be the number. It's just if it's less than that, you run a peril of a challenge. If it's longer than that, you're probably okay. But of course, you have some other sensitivities there. So zoning would answer that question. I think, and I think that's pretty clear cut. I think my ask of the council or ask of the committee is, do you want any other options explored with regard to revising our enforcement process? And if so, I can bring concepts, ideas, thoughts back in a more formalized piece.
Yeah, I think those 2 pieces, the zoning piece and the enforcement piece, need to move in tandem.
I agree.
So for March, I can bring back perhaps some greater clarity on the zoning implications. And do you want any thoughts on buffering, or does the council wish to pursue at this point limiting cultivation to that singular LI zone in the Washington Avenue area?
When we talk about buffering, I can see portions of that Pleasant Hill parcel where that's all zoned light industrial that are pretty considerably far from that one residential street. And so I can see the desire there, but when we talk about, what I don't want to do is get tangled up about buffering and existing facilities. Like, what do we do if we change all the buffering, but we still have existing facilities that no longer have a compliant,
Yeah. So,
right? I'm struggling with the wording, but
So
you know what I'm saying?
I think that if the council wanted to say, look, the issue here is cultivation. The narrative is, the problem here is cultivation's establishment's proximity to residential neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And so if a facility lived within a light industrial or industrial zone that was 2,000 feet from a residential, residence, therefore, the likelihood that that's going to be an issue. So we'll consider that. I haven't done the analysis. We worked with our GIS to understand if those places exist. Or again, you get into what's an appropriate setback.
Well, and so I guess more my question is, do we run ourselves into a problem if we take the buffering approach, but then we have businesses that have licenses that are not compliant with that buffering?
Then they would be subject to the phase-out.
Okay.
Right, so
Just wanna make sure that
if you did do a
we're clear.
buffer and they met that buffer, then
They
they
would
wouldn't
be
be subject,
considered
because
not-
the revised zoning, they're compliant.
My suggestion would be to have them come back to us in March with some more specifics and some.
I'm open-minded to the idea of buffering and what that looks like and where that might be appropriate.
Yeah.
With the full acknowledgement
Yeah.
that I might very well say this gets complicated very quickly, and now that I know what this looks like, I think we should just
Right.
settle in this Washington.
Right.
industrial park.
And I would agree with that.
But I'm
But-
willing to at least look at what Pumpkin Hollow Industrial Park.
I think we
like
learned a
industrial
lot.
stuff.
Oh, yeah. All right. That's it.
So that'll be included in the packet, and then, people can respond and opine on whatever, say, for our proposal.
Okay, good.
Awesome, thank you.
Future agenda, obviously March, cannabis. Anything else?
Something I can think of.
Whatever
Plans? Do you know of anything? off the
I
top
know
of
we have a list going, I have no doubt. it's full. I couldn't tell you off the top. of my
That's
head.
okay. All right,
From this
Yeah,
committee,
we'll keep it open. But definitely, cannabis is gonna be ongoing, just so everyone will know, all right? Motion to adjourn? Oh, maybe.
I'll make a motion to that.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody, happy